Hello there. Today I'm looking at a sweet wine. The wine concerned is Muscat Beaumes de Venise. This is from Paul Jaboulet Aîné. This is the Le Chant de Griolles. It's the 2019 vintage of that. And this is a half bottle. So Jaboulet, the company, traces its foundation back to 1834, and Antonie Jaboulet, who started growing vines on the Hermitage hill and also had the property that is now Domaine de Thalabert, just south of Tain-l'Hermitage. The company was in the same family for 6 generations, but got into some difficulties in the 1990s. 1997 saw the death of Gerard Jaboulet, the head of the company, and at a time when wine quality was seen to be falling, unfortunately his successors were unable to stop that. So in 2006 the company was bought by the Frey family. So Jean-Jacques Frey, a Swiss-French property developer whose daughter Caroline is a very experienced enologist, bought the company and had not only the ability to put capital into the company and invest in its future, but also had a real vision to take it forward. And over the last 18 years, we've undoubtedly seen the wines of Jaboulet improve in quality enormously. The Freys are particularly concentrated on the estate's top wines, the Hermitage, La Chapelle, Domaine de Thalabert, the wines that come off their own vineyards. The company also sells quite an extensive range of négociant wines. So, for instance, on the back label of this points out that this is Mise en Bouteille par Paul Jaboulet Aîné. So there's no reference to the making the wine or aging it. It's simply purchased, presumably blended, and bottled by Jaboulet. And this is not particularly unusual, particularly in Beaumes de Venise, where the size of producers tends to be really small. Some of this can be traced back to the 14th century, evidently, when with the papacy in Avignon, they rather took a shine to the wines of Beaumes de Venise, and actually there was a decree that people could only keep a certain amount of the wine at home and all the rest had to be sent and sold in Avignon. That evidently disincentivised people from setting up large estates in Beaumes de Venise, and that continues to this day. As a region, Beaumes de Venise has a very long history. Pliny the Elder writes about the growing of a grapevine which some people believe may have been Muscat in this region, and he's writing in the 1st century AD. Obviously, at that stage, distillation wasn't available to people, so the wines couldn't have been sweet. Fortification doesn't start until the 14th century, and actually it's not until you get to the 17th century where it's practiced regularly here. Muscat Beaumes de Venise gets its appellation contrôlée in 1945. It's dated back to 1943, but the confirmation of the methods of making this sweet wine are therefore relatively recent. The vineyards here are generally on terraced slopes. They sit between the Dentelles de Montmiral and Mont Ventoux. The soils are a mix of pebble and limestone. I'm wondering whether the pebble is riverstone or whether that's more gravel. I'm not entirely sure. I would think probably rounded riverstones. And the climate is slightly modified by the Dentelles de Montmiral, which shelters these vineyards from the Mistral winds blowing down from the hills. So actually this is a relatively warm, sheltered appellation. One thing that is mentioned on the back label of this is very careful selection of the Muscat grapes being used. And that's important because at picking, the grapes have to have a sugar level of 252 grams per litre. So these are sweet, sticky grapes, and therefore the pickers, working by hand, because most of these vineyards are terraced, will go in and they will have to select the ripest grapes. And they're not looking for rotten botrytis grapes, they're simply looking for ripeness on the vine. At the winery, a direct pressing takes place. Fermentation goes on at relatively cool temperature, and we're told the wine ferments with quite high solids. Cool fermentation, I suppose, is aimed at retaining as much of the beautiful fruity aromas of the Muscat as possible. This particular wine is 100% Muscat Blanc Petit Grand. You have to be using Muscat Petit Grand. However, you are able to use Muscat Petit Grand Noir, but none goes into this. Once fermentation reaches a stage where the sugar level in the must has fallen to 110 grams per litre, the wine is fortified. The idea of moutage, adding a neutral spirit to kill the yeasts and to prevent further fermentation, and thus to leave the wine sweet. Hence the term vin doux naturel. This is natural sugar that's retained in the wine, not sugar that's been added back to it. Now, the wine may well stay in tank for a further 6 months, but I have no notes here about aging. Certainly it spends no time in oak. It may spend a little time in bottle prior to release. But I'm not particularly sure this is a wine that needs a lot of aging, because primarily its virtue is its beautiful, fresh, clean aromas. There is one question that I've been unable to answer. The wine is given the name Le Chant de Griolles. Looking at the translation of that, that's referring to the song of the Griolles, the chanterelle mushrooms. So I'm not really sure what the story behind the singing mushrooms is. Perhaps if anybody can enlighten us, I'd love to know. So let's see what we make of the wine, shall we? It's a relatively medium yellow. There's a sort of a pale hint, but at the same time there's an oranginess to it. The wine has, as I say, 15% alcohol. It has too, to be Muscat Beaumes de Venise, and it has quite a lot of sugar. So I'm actually surprised it's not really forming tears, particularly on the glass there. It may do given time, but I mean, it doesn't seem particularly viscous, which is strange. Let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas have a wonderful freshness. I suppose it starts with a sort of a citric note, but then very quickly becomes floral, grapey. I mean, it's muscaty, basically. So you have these floral, grapey tones. There's hints of lychee, tinned lychee, that's sort of the fresher end of the lychee spectrum. Tinned lychee, I suppose, also because there is that sort of syrupy note there. I suppose there's hints of honey on the finish. There's a lovely richness. So let's have a taste, shall we? On the palate, the wine's sweet. Not lusciously so. I mean, it's fully sweet. This is 110 grams per litre sugar, it has to be. But at the same time, it's not quite got the sort of the rounded, honeyed, luscious notes that something like a Sauterne would have. There's some nice fresh acidity in there. And that's lifting some lovely grapey perfumes sort of on the edge of the tongue there. And there do seem to be some slight hints of citrus, and that's stopping the wine from just seeming like grape juice, and perhaps giving a little bit of lift to the floral perfumes that are there. There are perhaps some hints of honeysuckle. As the wine carries on in the mouth, you start to see a little of the alcohol coming through, just sort of around the fruit on the mid-palate, almost giving us sort of a slightly toastiness and a touch of warmth. There's no, I'm saying toastiness, there's no oak note here whatsoever. The finish is quite clean. Maybe that is where a little more acidity might have enlivened the wine a bit more, but you don't really expect muscats to have particularly high acid levels. So you are left with notes of syrup, grapey notes, the lychee notes, and some of the lovely floral top notes there. The finish has reasonable but not exceptional length. It's a very nicely balanced sweet wine, which is offering some really good value. It's not hugely complex, but it has lovely clean flavours. It's the sort of wine you could serve as an aperitif very successfully, or at the end of the meal with cheeses or with fruit desserts or something like that. I think the wine probably could age for 4 or 5 years. It would probably become more rounded, more honeyed. I wouldn't necessarily think of cellaring it for a long time, because I think then you start to lose the delicate, elegant, muscaty perfumes that really are the making of the wine. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. If you'd like to leave any comments, please pop those in the comments box below. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, do please share it with them. We'd really appreciate that. If you'd like to see more of these videos, the best answer would be to subscribe to our channel, and then you can sign up to be notified every time we post a new video. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and I do hope you'll manage to make some time and come and join us for another video tasting sometime in the very near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.